Yes, it's 900 hours, and that means it is time for your favorite Sunday morning show. That's Media Monitor. We are coming to you live here on the SABC News Channel. I'm your host, Alicia Jali. Here's a quick update on the leading stories right now. The Gautrain Management Agency says its workers have started repairing the railway line that a cement truck damaged. Services between Pretoria and Hatfield were disrupted yesterday morning when a truck driver lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a wall that borders the tracks. The NC's top leadership is discussing how divisions, factionalism and leadership squabbles are eroding public confidence on the ruling party. The NC's last National Executive Committee meeting for this year is taking place in Irene West of Pretoria. Well, the NC has wished Orlando Pirates well ahead of the encounter with the Tunisian side at Toile du Sahel this afternoon. The Soweto Giants made history by becoming the first South African team to contest the CAF Confederations Cup final. They will need to win or secure a draw if they are to be crowned the champions. Thousands of people are expected to take place in rallies around the world today to call for a global agreement to combat climate change. More than 2,000 events are planned on the eve of the UN summit in Paris, in which 180 countries are to attend. Military officials in Cameroon say 2 female suicide bombers have carried out attacks in the northern town of Dabanga, killing at least 5 people. They say a teenager set off explosives in a shop while the other bomber targeted a family. The attackers are suspected to belong to Nigerian-based group Boko Haram, which has carried out a series of cross-border raids in Cameroon's far north region. Let's now have a look at the front pages of our Sunday newspapers. The Sunday Times there is leading with PRASA seeking a 2.65 billion rand refund from the Spanish company that provided the very controversial 4,000 trains that apparently were too tall for South Africa's railways. The Sunday Independent leads with a story of a top editor who was an apartheid spy. We will be joined by veteran journalist Mr. John Matson, who will unpack more on the story for us. The Weekend Argus leads with the same story as the Sunday Independent. There it is, it's the Sunday Tribune, and it's leading with a story of an armed and dangerous gang in KwaMashu who are apparently threatening to murder police officers in order to avenge the killing of their comrades. All right, a very good morning. My guest this morning, I'm very honored to be joined by Mr. John Matson. He's the author of God, Spies and Lies, a book that has caused major waves in some of the morning newspapers. Mr. Matson, sir, a very good morning. What an honor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
John, it's awesome to hold this book in my hand. I haven't had quite a chance to read all of it, but for the benefit of our viewers out there who haven't had the same chance, please tell us, give us a quick synopsis of what the book is about.
Well, it became a big book. It's really trying to understand our history in a new, non-racial way that really looks at all the parts of it. And I use the media just as a thread to understand the politics. For instance, people may not know the first newspaper in South Africa was started in 1800 by slave traders. And the slave trading company got a license from a corrupt British governor. So that was how things started. Then if you look later in the 19th century, there was a real burgeoning of black newspapers all over South Africa, right until Union. But that was really cut off. Union had a very bad effect on that. But one of the other interesting things is how Cecil Rhodes was supporting a black newspaper, a Dutch newspaper, an English newspaper at the same time and using it for political purposes. Anyway, so that's it, but it goes right to the present, and I'll leave you to ask some questions to go into the more controversial parts.
That's very interesting, John. You know, before we continue, let me just quickly give our viewers at home a quick synopsis. God, Spies and Lies is an explosive insider's account of how South Africa got to where it is today and how things went wrong. Well, these are the words of our guest today, Mr. John Matson, and he is a political and foreign correspondent and one of the pioneers of democratic South Africa's free broadcasting. environment. John, look, you mentioned here in one of the passages that you housed the incumbent president as your house guest. Tell us a bit about that relationship there.
Well, you've got to remember this was a very different time. I was going away to the States. I was doing a documentary series comparing race in America and South Africa, and Jacob Zuma was head of ANC intelligence, and he needed a place to stay. And remember, people came back from exile with nothing, and he was one of the first to come in because he was preparing the way for the others. And he stayed in my house for a couple of months, and while he was there, he hosted Madiba and a group from MK when they were bringing people from exile and internal together to meet.
Does he know about the book yet?
I've no idea.
Look, John, former President Nelson Mandela and Charles Bloomberg are very prominent figures in your book. Tell us more.
Well, I've spoken to Mandela about Charles and Charles about Mandela. They were friends. What is really interesting about the relationship was while Charles Bloomberg was at the Sunday Times in a senior position, he was secretly meeting Madiba, and what they were discussing was strategies for how to end apartheid. And at that time, you've got to understand that the nationalist government was really felt like a monolith. Many of your viewers are too young to remember, but at that time it just seemed impossible to break them. They got stronger and stronger. And they wanted to understand what were its workings, what kept it strong. And they really isolated two things, the ideology, which they called Christian nationalism, yes, and the Afrikaner Broederbond. And Charles Bloomberg set it as his task to break open the Broederbond in the Sunday Times. And it took him 3 or 4 years, and he did it. In 1963, he broke it open in the Sunday Times.
John, please, I should have started with this. Please explain the title. A lot of people are saying, how is this politically related? God, lies, and spies.
Well, I suppose the answer is you have to read the book. But really, there's a chapter on God and apartheid, and how God was used to justify apartheid. And it really comes, I don't want to get into too much detail, but it really comes from how a certain interpretation of Dutch Calvinism was used to say that apartheid was Christian.
John, look, there's also 3 images on part 3 of the founder of the book, the founder of Abantu Batho, Piksika Isaka Seme, Dr. D.F. Malan, editor of The Burger, as well as Mahatma Gandhi, who established the Indian Opinion. Now, you mentioned this earlier on in the interview. Only one of those newspapers have survived the apartheid regime and is today one of the biggest media houses
in the world.
How could this have happened, sir?
Well, what it shows you, I mean, this is why I put it there. These are 3 pictures of political leaders in South Africa in the 1910s who were editors or in charge of newspapers. One was Pixley Seme, who started a newspaper called Abantu Batho, which was the ANC newspaper in 1912. The other was Mahatma Gandhi, of course, who had Indian Opinion. And the third was D.F. Malan. D.F. Malan's paper was Die Burger, and that's the basis of Naspers today, which is one of the biggest companies in the world. The other 2 closed. And of course, it asks the obvious question, what if they would all have been allowed to thrive?
Absolutely.
You could have had a black Naspers, an Indian Naspers. You could have had all sorts of things.
All right. And so according to you, what would get the country back on track?
Well, I think we have to have quality leadership, and it has to have the courage to work with the Constitution. And I do think that there are dangers of secrecy now as much as there were dangers of secrecy then. The Broederbond operated through secrecy, and that gave it a lot of power. And now we have to have bold public debates in Parliament. We have to have civil society get stronger and fight for the issues that it cares about.
Can I quote you on the prefix here at the back? It says, 25 years later, my former house guest has all but morally bankrupted Nelson Mandela's ruling African National Congress. Tell us a bit about that statement, sir.
Well, I think, you look at Nkandla and it's never solved. We're a modern country. We have very ancient aspects as well. But we're a country that can't wait years and years for a decision, whether it's about Nkandla or the SAA. You have to have efficient, positive leadership, and you have to respect the constitutional institutions like the public protector. To take years and years to second guess a constitutionally protected body, it holds us all back, and the country can be turned around economically if you do the right thing. And I'll give you one example, and that's the information economy. We missed the information revolution. I have a chapter that says why we missed it and how we could get back.
So what are the teachings basically in this book, Mr. Matisonn?
Well, we have to have the courage that we had in the beginning. You know, the Mandela generation had a strategy that was clearly thought out, and what Mandela was talking about in 1961 succeeded in 1994. That was the plan. Since then, we've been uncertain about our plan, and increasingly uncertain. We have to have a plan, and the problems are in some ways more difficult because they're economic, but you have to take bold decisions, and you have to engage with all aspects of civil society. You may not like our business community. You might say they're old, white and old, and they're part of the old regime. But you have to decide, do you want them or don't you? How are you going to deal with them? You need to build, I mean, when I was in the Broadcast Authority, we built black media houses, and what you see now all started when we were there, so we were very proactive about that. But you have to make decisions about what you are and what you're trying to build.
John, very quickly, I know we're almost out of time, but I have to ask you this. Who is this book really targeted at?
Well, it's targeted at everyone. It talks about everyone. It'll make a lot of people cross. I look at how the liberal establishment failed in the end with the Rand Daily Mail. I look at how the Broederbond needed to be challenged. And I look at how things now need to be changed. And I hope that young South Africans will find something valuable in it.
All right. And where can they find it, sir?
In all the bookshops.
All right. Mr. Matisonn, thank you so much. So it was such a pleasure. Let me now thank our very first guest this morning, author Mr. John Matson, who was telling us about his latest book, God, Spies and Lies. Media Monitor returns shortly after this break. Do stay with us.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back. Now, if you've just joined us, we are now discussing 16 days of activism with Mr. Mbuyiselo Boeta. He's an active member of the Sisonke Gender Justice. Sir, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much. Just a small correction. It's called Sonke.
Sonke Gender Justice. All right. Well, let's hope that you also got that at home. Well, this year's 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign runs under the banner Count Me In, Together, moving a non-violent South Africa forward. It highlights the impact of abuse on women and children. Before we delve into our discussion, let's take a look at this insert. Please note that it contains content that some sensitive viewers may find disturbing.
He resembles any other 8-year-old, innocent and carefree. However, this grade 2 pupil has already encountered trauma. Here he reenacts the first time he was allegedly violated in the school toilet.
Before, we didn't know there is something like this. A boy can rape a boy. A rape, we always looking at rape to girls, not to boys.
The nightmare did not end there. 2 months ago, he was allegedly sexually assaulted again by an older boy.
And this second one, first day when he comes, he was smelling again and took him to the bathroom. When I opened his pants and see, it was the same thing, a big hole to him.
Same-sex rape among young boys have become more prevalent in schools. Social workers say in most cases, juvenile perpetrators themselves have been sexually abused or come from violent homes with poor parental figures. The juvenile suspects have already appeared in court.
The first suspect is 16-year-old. He was arrested, taken to court, and he was released in the care of his parents. The second suspect was also arrested, a 14-year-old. He appeared in court. The court decided that he must be taken to a place of safety.
The victim no longer attends school. One of the alleged perpetrators, however, is still in the classroom.
We need to take into consideration that these are juvenile offenders, but as much as they are children, they also need services. They should not be a risk to our other children. The schools need to adopt the school safety policies, because we want to know if children are going to be abused within the schools, what are the teachers doing? What is this department saying?
Social workers say these crimes are another sign of how deeply rooted violence is in South African society. Gillian Pillay, SABC News, Boksburg.
But what a disturbing story. What are your views about that? Same-sex rape?
Yes, it's quite disturbing. But what it's also said is that we don't often talk about it.
That's the problem.
Yeah, these are crimes that we would wish not to talk about. And I think what it highlights is that this society, we can no longer afford the luxury of keeping quiet.
Baba, is the National 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children campaign making a difference if we keep seeing stuff like that? Is it still relevant?
Oh, more than relevant, because the cases continue to rise. I think it's important. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that what 16 Days does, it in fact continues to highlight the importance of us keep on talking. Because you see, if we can do two things. We can look the other way and say that it doesn't work and not talk about it, which means then we get paralyzed, which means that we get disempowered. So what 16 Days does, it continues to call on us to say, whilst we have these challenges, whilst we have these gaps, whilst we have these problems, but Alicia, we can't afford the luxury of keeping quiet and saying that, because as we speak, there's a woman there who's raped. There's a young girl, there's a young boy who's molested, who's abused. Imagine what would happen if we decide to say that it doesn't help. What else do we do? Do we then fold our arms and say, let's close shop? I don't think so.
How do we then bring about swift change and debate around these issues?
Well, I think it's important for us to say that 16 days, 365 days, very critical, very important, but it's a process that every day we must begin to, and I know that, there are pockets of success. There are stories where, Alicia, you and I and South Africans would know that all is not business as usual.
Absolutely.
So I think continuing to speak, continuing to, these campaigns, they may be small, they may not be on radio, on television, but you can't underestimate it. So it means that as South Africans, I'm eternally optimistic. I really believe in the power of, us speaking out continuously.
Mr. Botha, look, how could we approach the hate crimes, especially those directed at marginalized groups, especially the LGBTI community, and how could we educate communities about such?
Well, I think we go back to the Constitution, that as South Africans, this is a guiding document, about sexual orientation. But you also don't stop at the Constitution. We make sure that as a country that, Alicia, on daily basis, people who are gays, lesbians, bisexual, are part of us, but also to continue to remind, and this maybe remind South Africans that there are no hierarchy of rights. You can't say, Alicia, that these rights, it's okay when they are, violated. you can't say when gays and lesbians every day they are disrespected, they are violated, that it's okay because there is a thinking that, this is un-African, this is ungodly. And these are things that all of us every day in our different communities, we must speak against. But you see, Alicia, these are not popular things. We must speak against them. We must have men of the cloth be in front and saying that these things should not be done in our name. I mean, gays and lesbians should not be, persecuted, should not be undermined, should not be disrespected in the name of culture, in the name of religion, so that every day these messages must always be part and parcel of the agenda of our liberation. By the way, we are far from, other forms of liberation. And one of them is that as a country, we really can't fold our arms and say that when you violate a gay person or a lesbian or intersex, it's okay. It can be correct. It can be okay.
Speaking of that, let's expand on that, Mr. Botha. Let's talk about responsibility. Whose responsibility is it to bring about these debates? I mean, you mentioned faith leaders, you mentioned communities, but how do we then affect our debates?
I think everyone else, and this is what I think the president said, on when we launched the 16 days in the Northwest, that it can be government's responsibility. Each and every one of us have got a responsibility. Imagine what would happen, Alicia, if we do not only speak of the 60 days of these other, misdemeanors. If as a country, when you open your television, we would have a slogan like, these things can't be done in our name. Imagine what would happen if we say as a country, let's remove guns, because a lot of women in particular, they get killed by licensed guns, unlicensed guns. So there has to be a focus on how do we as a country ensure that and speak against guns that kill women every day. How do we then ensure that the knowledge that women can ask, not only for protection order, but women can demand that this man, a gun must be removed because there's a possibility that this gun may kill. Because when I have a gun, I mean, the propensity of me using it, it's quite high, unlike when I don't have a gun. So I'm just saying that, Alicia, all of these are multifaceted, approaches. They need these approaches so that it's not one against the other. But all of us, these approaches, I mean, you have community activism. We must continue to say communities must speak out. Government has a duty. I mean, police have got a duty to do, to ensure that, statements are taken correctly, to ensure that, survivors of rape, of sexual violence, they know that they can go to police stations without fear of being ridiculed. So all of us have got a role, that there are laws that are there, Alicia, and these laws must be implemented. And those that, the duty bearers, those that are responsible to ensure that these laws are implemented. And if they don't, there must be consequences. So I'm just saying that all of us have a role to play.
Let's continue with that. Let's talk about the issue of awareness, Babu Botha. Do a lot of people know, even in these communities, how to report these matters and how to really get their cases across to the highest level?
Well, I think there's one can argue and say that it may not be enough, but the level of awareness is there. No wonder we say that probably during the 16 days
you have heightened awareness.
So, but what we need, Alicia, is that communities must own these things. You see, domestic violence, sexual violence, and all these, what police would call contact violence, in fact, are things that communities must own up. Communities must say that, Alicia, this program is mine. If I operate in this area, I own this, and I know that it is to the betterment of this community. So if communities own up, so that the solutions come from communities.
Absolutely.
Because you don't underestimate the value of community involvement. Don't even think that people don't know what needs to be done. People know. All we need to do is to encourage, to support, and to journey with communities, and don't bring in solutions to them, because communities must design.
Be part of the
Absolutely,
solution.
must design, because they have solutions. What needs to happen is, how do we ensure that communities are, they own this, they are not left behind.
Baba, very quickly, I know we're also out of time again, but I have to ask you, Sonke's involvement in 16 days of activism, how can the public join in?
Well, the public can join in by making sure that there's education around gun laws. Very important. How do we make sure the gaps that are there? Alicia, something that we need as a country, as we speak now, is, remember, during the HIV/AIDS, we've had a powerful process,
yes,
which is called, where you have communities, saying about how do we make sure that these things work. And President Zuma, when he came in, we know that the issue of HIV and it began to change. So you need what we call community involvement in drawing up plans, so that these plans, they work for us.
Mr. Botha, thank you so much for your time here on Media Monitor, sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
All right, well, that was Mr. Botha joining us this morning, and we're talking about the 16 days of activism. The SABC is a partner in the 16 days of activism campaign, offering a platform to educate the public about the significance of protecting women and children. We'll be back with more on the COSATU 12th Congress after this break. Do stay with us.
Looking for social issues?
It is not our intention to give condoms to 10-year-old children.
We're here to assist you.
Looking for religious issues?
The point is not for the church to try and prove whether this is the fact.
So we want accountability. Is there a system of governance in your churches?
Political issues.
Barack Obama said Africa should stop looking to the outside for salvation and focus on someone else being at fault for the problems of the continent.
Economic issues.
The young mothers, single mothers that's buying property now.
Or just looking to air your views.
Here are some of your views on social media.
Look no further, as Newsroom has all the informative information you need. Weekdays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
This is Media Monitor. Welcome back. Now, my guest for the rest of the hour is Labour analyst Mamokgethi Molopiane, as well as political analyst Professor Friedman. We're talking about the COSATU National Congress. A very good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Alicia.
All right. Well, one of the stories that made headline news this week was undoubtedly the COSATU's National Congress. The Trade Union Federation's Congress got off to a rocky start with contestation over credentials. Now, after this was resolved, it was business as usual. Affiliates expressed strong views over leadership preferences in both COSATU and the ANC. Former COSATU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi and his union ally NUMSA were officially expelled from the federation. Labour Minister Mildred Oliphant used her her address to Congress to urge delegates that they should investigate unions who have formed partnerships with labor brokers. Now, the Trade Union Federation elected a new top brass. All leadership positions were uncontested. Let's have a look at this clip.
We want to confirm the expulsion of the former General Secretary of the Federation, Uzwelezi Mavavi.
The decision by the CEC to dismiss NUMSA should be set aside by this Congress, and NUMSA should be restated as an affiliate of this particular federation.
No amount of howling fowl changes the realities of the facts.
Right. Well, Prof, I just want to get one thing out of the way first. I mean, the credentials issue confused most everybody. Please take us through that process. Did they have a legitimate claim?
Yes, I mean, it's legitimate to question credentials. It was done at the Special Congress in July, and in fact, there was a rerun at this Congress. Essentially, what the credentials fight is about is who's entitled to a vote. And obviously, that matters a great deal because if you're not sure that everybody there is entitled to vote, the result you get is not a fair result. So what happened was that the opponents of the current leadership questioned the right of certain delegates to be there, in particular the delegates from a union called Limusa, which is the Liberated Metalwork Union. It's a rival union to NUMSA, yes, which was formed by people who were opposed. And the view was that really they had no right to be there because they did not comply with the COSATU Constitution. Obviously, two things are happening there at the same time. On the one hand, some of the delegates are saying, look, you're going to win this unfairly because you're going to have the votes of people who shouldn't be here. On the other hand, they test their strength. And in fact, if you're looking at it from the outside, you knew exactly at the beginning of the Special General Congress and at the beginning of this Congress how things were going because you just had a look at the way they voted on the credentials, because they really voted on the credentials on a factional basis. If you were in favor of NUMSA, you voted the one way. If you were against NUMSA, you voted the other way.
Wow, thank you for clarifying that. Mamokgethi, look, Vavi and NUMSA are officially out of COSATU now. Please give us your views.
Well, when you were at the Congress and you looked at how it unfolded, it was clear that at the Congress they were really cementing their view to say this is what the decision of a Congress is going to be. So they were legitimizing the decision to expel NUMSA and Vavi. And the Congress did just that. Therefore, to the ordinary worker who is out there, it is not going to be seen as you did not give them a fair chance. Because they would say we've had hearings for them, we suspended them, then expelled them, then the Congress confirmed this. So it looks like finally they are saying, by the way, those troublemakers, that is NUMSA and Vavi, who were giving us a problem, now that they are out, look at us as we move forward. We will try to build a more united COSATU, but of course we know that chances of that happening are very minimal.
What do you think, Prof?
No, I agree that it's very, I mean, I think it's, I'd be a bit more pessimistic.
Is it a pipe dream?
No, of course it's a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream because, look, we knew before the Congress, both Vavi and NUMSA made it clear before the Congress that they weren't contesting their expulsions because they felt the issue was over. I think what's happened in COSATU very, very simply is that you had divisions within COSATU. In the main, there are exceptions to this. Those who were opposed to the current leadership have either left or been driven out. You've got left a couple of unions, FAWU, the Food and Allied Workers Union, CAWUSA, the commercial and catering unions, who are fighting a lone battle. Of course, the question is whether they're going to continue to do this, because either they're going to stay in COSATU and be the minority, or they will join a new federation, which we will have sometime next year.
Is it a correct view to view Limusa as being a replacement for NUMSA?
It is clear. I mean, when you look at who is leading it, he's the expelled former president of NUMSA, and he went and formed Limusa and got accepted immediately just after NUMSA itself was suspended. And also when you look at as Stephen was saying, the smaller federations that are trying to fight this to say, let us be fair in our way of handling things. First of all, also they do do not have the numbers, and numbers often matter in trade union matters. So it is quite interesting to see how this will unfold, whether FAU will stay in or they'll go. But perhaps even more curious for me is to say, when will Mr. Vavi and NUMSA make their move to say we are finally launching a new federation, because they've been talking about it for a while now.
Look, let's talk about Bladen Zimande's remarks on the divisions within the federation. I know you touched a little bit on it, Professor.
Well, Bladen Zimande has to be very careful in public what he says about the divisions, because if you look at Umsebenzi Online, which is the SACP's online newspaper, it has conducted a constant campaign against NUMSA. It has been a very divisive force. So, you have to, what it creates the impression of is you divide the federation by conducting this campaign, and then when what you wanted to do is achieved, then you start saying all these pious things about how we must unite, you see, because you've got rid of the people you wanted to get rid of. And it obviously has no credibility. I mean, what the SACP and its General Secretary should have done is worked for unity within COSATU, regardless of what your political opinions were. They've, unfortunately, if we judge by their public utterances, they've played a role in dividing COSATU. And the result of this is, as Mamokgethi says, and it's become very clear, we are going to have two federations next year. I think by sometime next year, competing for the same COSATU membership. And obviously, if you consider yourself a friend of the trade union movement, you have to ask yourself whether that was really what you were trying to achieve.
Look, the issue of labour brokers, I mean, COSATU is just the latest. What do you think about that, Mamokgethi?
Look, Minister Oliphant has been quite, perhaps this was her most compelling presentation to a Congress about labour broking. She was saying to the Federation, how do you sit on the other side and say we government as the Department of Labour and so forth have not done enough to stop labour broking when you yourself, and for me what was even interesting, she said, when some of you individuals are involved in business that is in partnership with labour brokers. And of course we know that the following day, the fourth day, COSATU came back to say the minister must quantify her statement and put forth evidence that supports such. But she was saying basically to them, get your house in order before you come and point fingers at me. Now it does not mean that she is saying I mean, it's clear she was saying you are on the same, you are the referee and the player in the same thing, make up your mind.
Is this not going to cause further division within the Tripartite Alliance, Prof?
Well, you see, it's interesting the extent to which it's showing the divisions which already exist, because,
And we know the ETOL's issue is also a part of another campaign.
The story is often told. Now, what happened is that the Stuma Dlamini faction wants to move closer to the ANC. Vavi and NUMSA wanted to move closer away. What this is not revealing is that there's factionism within the ANC. So there are people within the ANC who think COSATU's gone too far. Not only the minister. I mean, Gwede Mantashe, the Secretary General, has been very critical of the direction that COSATU has taken. So in a sense, what you have is some of the divisions within the ANC now being fought over within COSATU.
All right. And do you think Vavi and NUMSA being out, the Federation will actually now try to resolve those issues, internal factions?
Well, it's not only, we need to be aware it's not only Vavi and NUMSA. If you ever look at what's been happening in the union movement over the last few months, you have rival unions being formed in several industries. You have breakaways in the public sector, in transport, in various other industries. And really what we are moving towards here is a situation in which you will have two unions in each industry competing for members.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick ad break. We'll be back for more shortly after this break. Do stay with us.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Are you saying the king must go to jail? You are not royal blood, therefore you are going to serve time on behalf of the king. Where does the public protector stand on this matter? Are you with the marches, for the marches, against the march? If this is your ancestor, it is very much his ancestor as well, because this is the cradle of humankind. Is there God somewhere in your signs? Drinking the blood of a person with albinism gives extra magical powers. A man of the cloth is involved here because it would mean that somehow religion is being brought into this part of the myth. What do you say to that?
Watch Question Time with me, Mpho Tsedu, Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on the SABC News Channel.
You're watching Media Monitor. Welcome back. You can still share your views on Twitter on our discussions, and we are talking about COSATU. Now, addressing the COSATU National Congress, Nzimande launched a veiled attack against factions he believes are trying to derail the tripartite alliance. COSATU wants the SACP to explore contesting state power soon. Now, this declaration comes at a time when the state of the ANC-led alliance is making headlines and SACP leaders are being attacked by some in the ruling party. Amukhet.
Well, when you look at how Minister Nzimande was speaking at COSATU Congress, I find it strange because he was preaching for unity, but at the same time, when you look at the effort that has gone when there were issues around NUMSA and Mr. Vavi, it becomes clear that he's on the opposite. And I do not know how, as the SACP, when COSATU in its program of the day and some of the issues was going to touch on was how does the alliance move forward and the weakened state of the alliance. I would have wanted to hear him talk about that and touch on that and how COSATU as an alliance partner can work together with them, but he didn't, and I think that's an opportunity that is missed to the union members who were not attending the Congress. They must have been rubbing their eyes in disbelief to say, here we are at our biggest and most decision-making gathering, and it seems workers' issues and in its role for the alliance are not being discussed. In fact, we are caught up in the fights about who has the right to attend the Congress and who is the right leader.
Prof. Yeah, well, you see, I think in the longer term, the hope for working people at the moment, because working people desperately do need trade unions, the hope is that if you have a situation from next year in which there is competition between two trade union federations, then you will also have a situation where trade union leadership will have to take the members seriously, because if you don't take the members seriously, they'll go off and they'll join the rival union. It might be a very bumpy time. There'll be a lot of tension around that. But I think workers are better off when two trade union federations are competing for their services, at least for a time. People would say that, permanently it's not a good idea, because we've really reached a stage in the trade union membership where I think it's generally accepted the leadership in the main is not listening to members. They're not serving members in the way that they should, and therefore we need some sort of change to make sure that we get back to a trade union movement which is actually the servant of working people.
But I mean, the formation of these new federations takes some time, and as we saw, they were saying that they probably didn't have rights to be at the Congress. Now, how long are we going to keep going back and forth while workers' issues are being pushed to the sidelines?
I do think that if another federation is formed, it is going to make South Africa's workplace, and in terms of attracting attention of workers, very interesting. And I say that because the current existing structures, the federations and the trade unions, have become too complacent, but also have become too comfortable in their positions, and so they feel that they do not have anybody who challenges them. But workers has shown us that if the leaders continue not to listen to them, they tend to prescribe a new order and form their own way of doing things. And I think that can be the leadership distance from the workers can really be put down to the fact that they've become so bureaucratized over time, and so they are no longer identifying with the issues that affect their workers on the shop floor, because they have ascended to a higher place, and at a higher place they do not see the need to attend to workers' issues. So that is going to be a challenge moving forward. But I do think a new federation forming, new trade unions forming, are going to be making workplace interesting in terms of they will be fighting for a slice of the same pie.
All right, so healthy competition. And Professor, speaking of healthy competition, what do you say to the COSATU top brass retaining their posts uncontested this time?
Well, you see, that's an indication of what we're talking about, because we've had a situation in which most of those people who would have opposed have moved out. You've also got a situation which makes the things, I think, more complicated, in that the nature of COSATU has changed. Most unions in COSATU, most members of COSATU used to be people in factories and shops in the private sector. Now most people in COSATU are public sector workers, and increasingly they are white-collar public sector workers. So what tends to happen is that instead of the concerns of ordinary working people being addressed, we have people who are already in the public sector fighting over who's going to get what position, etc. And really you need competition between two federations to change that, so that those workers who are being excluded by this process can hopefully have a voice and hopefully have a say in their working conditions.
And also make their choice. Speaking of things to be addressed now, after the president's statement, do you think that COSATU is now really going to relook the wage issue, the minimum wage subsidy?
I do not think so. And if you listen even to how the Minister of Labour was speaking, well, she was saying to them, we engage with you regularly at NETLEC on that issue. So if you do not send your delegates, if you do not participate meaningfully because you are caught up in your own internal battles about leadership, about factions, we cannot help you, because we have put a platform that is NETLEC to engage the national minimum wage worker. And if you listen to President Zuma, he said to the Congress, but what about the workers? It's okay that you are representing workers, but what about those who are unemployed? And that's the question that we've really been looking for answers for, to say, COSATU, how do you locate yourself outside the realms of those who've already organized? What about the reality of the everyday South African, the unemployed youth and other people who have been retrenched?
All right, very quickly, Professor, do you think as we're heading into 2016, the tripartite alliance is going to be stronger?
No, I think it's going to be weaker, because if you don't tolerate differences, then you become weaker. And that's the real lesson here. If you allow people to express their differences within the organization, you have a stronger organization. If you try to throw out those who disagree with you, you are weakened.
All right, and that's where we leave it for today's discussions. But let's see some of the tweets that you have for us this morning. Mazwai Votega says COSATU won't be the same. Vavi and Numsa were not afraid to speak their minds about important issues. Dibeba Matududi says COSATU rushed to get rid of Numsa and Vavi. The repercussions are yet to be felt after a self-gratifying game. And last but not least, Mujela Mudupe says the infighting will never stop. Some feel the need more powers. All right, and Siabonga Nyanga says, I personally welcome the resolution of COSATU in engaging SACP to contest state power. The ANC will see itself. Last but not least, finally, Ed Kamaroja says, it is about time this parasitic tendency must fall. The alliance has outlived its mission and has become acidic. Smu Kwela, if the SACP were to leave the alliance, which side will will most of those with dual membership choose? Very interesting points raised. And unfortunately, I can't take your comments on that. But regardless, Mamokgethi, thank you so much for joining us, Professor. Always a pleasure. To Tuesday, the 1st of December, marks International AIDS Day. The day continues to run with the theme Getting to Zero, which is a theme UNAIDS had established 4 years ago. South Africa will mark AIDS Day under the theme Towards an HIV-Free Generation. Rise, Act, Protect, Zero. The local theme speaks into breaking stigma and discrimination in communities. The day will be celebrated with different events across the nation. Well, we'd like to thank our guests for partaking in our discussions this morning. That was another jam-packed edition of your favorite program, Media Monitor. This has been a live broadcast from our SABC studios here in Johannesburg. We're back next week Sunday for another live and informative broadcast. Do find us on YouTube, Facebook, as well as Twitter. I'm Alicia Jali. This is SABC News. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Goodbye.
This is the unfortunate situation that some businesses find themselves in. With the rise in cash flow, a company that manages and processes 30 billion rand per year in the retail market says criminals are set to become more brazen.
Well, there's large amounts of cash are accumulated in a store, and that leads to it being a very attractive target. We've seen over the last 10 years an increase of 337% in armed robberies against business in this country. It's phenomenal.
Gauteng leads in the number of incidents, followed by the Western Cape and KZN. The banking sector is also pleading caution. While credit card fraud has declined by almost 30% this year, an 8.3% increase in debit card fraud was recorded. And these provinces have also been noted as problematic.
We generally see incidents happen, not necessarily a spike, but probably a little more, a greater number of incidents happening before you actually hit the festive season.
By the time the doors opened at City Hall, the queues were already around the block. And as the hours passed, the lines of graduates hoping to fill one of the 115 posts on offer in the province continued to grow. Despite this, the mood was positive.
A lot of people are looking for a job, so this project hopefully is going to help us.
I'm very hopeful, and I'm positive that I'll succeed in what I want to achieve today.
The department is scouring the provinces for over 600 skilled and experienced people to fill a specific list of posts.
We're looking for professional nurses, primary healthcare nurses. We're looking for technicians, engineers, artisans, lawyers.
The fast-track process sees applicants apply, get vetted, have a security check and go through for interviews, all in a couple of days.
Fanika came into his own during the 2015 athletic season, and for track and field fans, he will be the one to look out for at next year's Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro. The 23-year-old from the Cape flew the flag at the World Athletics Championships in Beijing in August, bagging a gold medal in the men's 400 meters. An overwhelmed Fanika was humbled by the recognition.
To me, this year was really just about representing my country, and it was really just an honor to be able to stand on that podium and say, I won a gold medal for South Africa, and I get 3 awards for South African Sportsperson of the Year. And I mean, I look at the guys I was nominated amongst, and these are actually guys that inspired me and motivated me to want to be the sportsperson I am today. And I'm just honored and blessed that I could carry this legacy of sports, South African sports stars, and hopefully we can inspire so much more.
Sportswoman of the Year, Ashley Moman-Pasio, one of the country's hottest cyclists, ends the year as the highest ever ranked South African in the world rankings in 6th place. Proteas seamer Kagiso Rabada was awarded the Newcomer of the Year, while the Springbok Sevens side, the first team to qualify for the Olympics in Rio and runners-up in the Sevens World Series, was named Team of the Year.
Salvaged in the early 1990s, each artifact tells a small part of a greater story. That of a ship that was the greatest ever built after the turn of the century. Its sheer size was awe-inspiring, thought to be unsinkable. But on the night of April 14, 1912, 4 days into her maiden voyage from England to America, an iceberg immortalized the RMS Titanic's story. Over 1,500 people perished in the icy waters of the North Atlantic